as a church that prides itself on being a church that has the truth, we don't realize that truth biblically always serves and protects love. Like that's truth's function. Like justice is so important because it protects and allows relationship and love to continue. Without truth and without justice, love is vulnerable and actually gets diminished and actually gets snuffed out. Like justice and truth actually protect love.
Welcome to Dealing Hope. So glad you can join me, and I guarantee that you will be blessed by this conversation with one of my good friends and one of the most efficient, well-organized and committed youth directors in the whole wide world, Pastor Lance Boulton. Lance, thank you so much for your time today. I've been looking forward to this conversation with you and wanted to dive straight into this. Well, there's been a thinking recently that maybe the way we did youth ministry in the past wasn't really the right way. And that is that we took youth away from the main church, from the adults, and we did youth ministry on the side. And then once we had done what we were doing in youth ministry, and I've been involved in that for many years and loved it and enjoyed it, but there are voices saying, well, maybe that wasn't the right way. And so coming to you in that you've been involved all the way through, and be interested in what you're seeing now as well. But what are your thoughts around this discussion around models and approaches to youth ministry?
No, thanks, Eddie. Yeah, good question, and a relevant one. And I guess the answer is we have done it a little bit wrong in the past, but I would suggest the correct answer is we need both. And so one of the, I guess, best illustrations or a paradigm to help us understand is diets. I think we've all been seduced or seen family members and friends come to a diet, and there's a diet that says just focus on this or don't eat that, or and there's an element of healthiness to it, or an element of truth, but the research every single time when it looks at it, the impact of that kind of restrictive diet always says in the end it's not actually healthy for us. And the best health diet for us, of course, is a well-rounded diet is always healthiest, and the research backs it up every single time. Yep. And it's the same when it comes to youth ministry.
Okay.
Too often what we've done is just focused on something that has an element of health or has a big element of health for young people, but we don't realize what we're missing that's actually making it overall an unhealthy diet. And that's one of the things that I think we've come to now, is this understanding of a well-rounded youth ministry diet. And one of the things early last year that really struck home for me, this was sitting down with youth leaders from all across New Zealand, doing my annual tour, where I got to sit with youth leaders all across New Zealand. And they were asking me questions like, but what about this? But what about that? What do we need to do? Just tell us the one thing. And I'm like, there isn't one thing. There's no magic pill. There's no magic, just do this. It's well-rounded. And over the years, we've seen kind of like the health diet, we've seen the fads come through where in my time, we've seen resiliency be the one big be all and end all. And then it was leadership. Young people need to lead. And then it was service. Young people need to serve. And then it was intergenerational connections, which we're still wrestling with. How do we intentionally knit young people into an overall life of the church, so it's not just them siloed out by themselves? Yeah. And then the current one is life groups and mentoring. But the thing is, none of these are a be-all, end-all, the magic bullet, but we need all of them. Like resiliency is one of the deepest, most profound things we can actually help young people with, and that needs intergenerational connections. Like they're all tied together. And if we understand that they go together, we actually have a more profound, better understanding of what youth ministry is. Like leadership, we can't keep young people out of leadership. They need a voice in the church. We need their giftedness and their eyes and their God-given ability to lead and have a voice. And so something that struck me from that catch up with all the leaders is what came out of it was a model where all of this came together, because youth leaders were going, but what about, but what about, but what about? And I'm like, yeah, that's all important, but you've got to know where to begin and how it's all wrapped together. And so what came out of that was a burger model for youth ministry. And it deals with those relationships you talked about, like young people with their peers and young people with caring adults with intergenerational connections. And in a burger model, they're the buns. Like a burger has to be built with buns, and they're relationships when it comes to youth ministry. And so the bottom one is deep friendships or connections with peers. Like that's where a burger is built from. Like no bottom bun, everything, doesn't matter how good the filling, it just drops out. And that's what so many youth leaders would tell me. They'd say, look, we are loving on our young people, good teaching, good opportunities, leadership, but they're just not sticking to church, or none of the stuff is sticking. And every time it was like, because they come from a church where they have no friends their own age. And young people struggle with that. A common scenario with small churches is there's a young person, their sibling, and then one other person who they just aren't really friends with. You know, there's three of them. Yeah. And they struggle. And so and I always say to parents and youth leaders, you've got to knit them in with another group. Like find your closest youth group, travel, do whatever you can. They need those friendships. They're young people. They also need to know that when they want to start dating, they actually have some opportunities amongst Adventist other young people who share their faith, share their beliefs. Like one of the greatest things we can do for our young people is ensure they have friends and romantic partners who actually are walking the same journey with Jesus. That's the bottom bun. The top bun is those intergenerational connections, caring adults. They keep the whole thing together. It's so important, and we need both. I've seen churches that only have one or the other, and it just doesn't work because all of the good stuff in between isn't held in place. You know, we serve a relational God. Yes. And they're the ways that young people actually experience Jesus is caring adults and then young people holding it together. Yeah. In the middle, quickly, a burger is a burger because of two things, a patty and cheese. Like you don't have a patty and a cheese, it's a salad roll. Salad rolls are good, but they're not a burger, and God's wanting us to offer a burger to our young people. And that patty, we know, is discipleship. A young person actually getting to know Jesus, grow in him, and actually be able to share him or serve him. And we know as a church that the main reason our young people walk away is they go, I never got to know Jesus. Yeah. You taught me how to do church. You taught me all these other things. You never actually introduced me to Jesus. And this is one of the big things that we know from research our young people walk away from. The patty has to be Jesus, actually knowing him, growing in him. The cheese slice is the other big component, which is family atmosphere. And that's what the caring adults set. Like a young person wants to know that they actually belong. They actually are valued. They're actually welcomed and wanted at church. And that's a family dynamic. That's a family atmosphere. And we know from research that the other big reason young people walk away from a church is because they don't feel welcomed. They don't feel valued. They don't feel they belong there. And so that's why we've always got to make sure that patty and that cheese slice form the substance of our youth ministry burger that we offer young people. That's what they need. It's what they absolutely need. That then leads to the source. That's God's grace. Like God's grace needs to permeate everything. And then it comes to the veggies. And veggies, that's the good stuff also in a burger. But the other things that go sort of in parallel with the patty and the cheese slice. And so that is all of the fads, for want of a better word, in youth ministry: leadership, service, intergenerational connections, good teaching, worship opportunities, like all of those beautiful things. And the other ones that we go, where are young people currently at? What do they need for us to make sure is in there? Like, are they leading? If not, then make sure they're offered opportunities there. Are they serving? If not, then get in there. You know, what are they missing? And that's what we make sure goes in there. But that's really connected with our youth leaders, where they finally go, oh, wow, I get it. Like all of those things are important. And I always say to them, start at the base. Are your young people meaningfully connected with other young people? And most of them will say yes, but some of them say no. And I'm like, all right, that's where to start. And then are there caring adults, people who just love on your young people and protect them, mentor them, really set the atmosphere in a church that says, hey, you belong. And that's another place that youth leaders then go, hey, and then the patty and the cheese. So as they keep going through those components, youth leaders, you can just see the lights come on, and pastors and parents even.
Yeah.
It's just been something good where none of those things are lost that actually make a difference in the lives of young people trying to get to know Jesus, grow in him and serve him. Yeah. So I hope that's answered your question. That's just what youth leaders have really popped with and what they have given to me as feedback and a model that just went, that so makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lance, I really like what you've done here because it just seems so big, so vast, all that's involved, even just the way you've listed some of these the directions that youth ministry has taken over the past years. And then looking at it from the perspective of a pastor or a youth leader, well, what do I do? And so if I were to come back to you and just summarize that for a pastor who's listening or a youth leader who's listening in a short, because I love this. I would not have known we were going to go to a hamburger model. I love it, a burger model. But that is just brilliant. So just a quick a nutshell of what you've just said in terms of a pastor who's listening saying, okay, where do I start with this? And like you've said, start at the base and build up, but just recap for me again.
So one of the blessings of the burger model is it helps a pastor or a youth leader or even parents to be able to go, how can I make a difference? And it gives kind of like an order of where to see or where to check your young people at. And so first of all, it says, look at relationships, because without supportive relationships, it doesn't work. Are they meaningfully supported or connected with other young people? If not, then spend effort there. Do they have caring adults next who actually support them, know them, and really mentor them and care for them? So focus on that. And as a pastor and youth leader, absolutely, you should be one of those. Are you? Then it goes to, are they actually being discipled? Like the focus of their programs and their stuff, and even in church, is what we're presenting in worship services something that helps them to know Jesus, grow in him, and get to serve him. Are they experiencing a family atmosphere? One of the simplest things is ask your young people, do you feel valued at church, and do you actually feel like you belong? They'll always say yes, and that's when you ask them, give me an example that helps you to know that. I've never had a young person say no, but it's always when I ask them, how do you know that? You're like, they really do know they're valued, or you're like, wow, I'm going to really get around that young person and let them know just how valued they are. Because it's the how do you know that really helps them to express where they feel about them in church. And then you can, once those things are in place, then you can go, okay, what are the gaps in terms of the things we know in youth ministry? Leadership, where are the leaders that aren't being tapped into? Where are the service opportunities where they get to go outside of church and actually make a difference in the community? Where are the different little aspects of their giftedness? Where are they not being taught? Where are the gaps in their teaching that we can pour into? So the burger model just helps create an order of really making a difference to then build and speak life into our young people.
Thank you so much, Lance. That really has really clicked with me and made a whole lot of sense. And I love the way that you've put it together. So this burger model, is this something you can buy a book about or read somewhere? Or is this something that's come up out of your own journey?
I guess just it is something that I've developed, but it's come out of conversations with youth leaders who always say, what do I need to do to actually make a difference? Or am I doing enough?
Yeah.
Because just everyone's so busy, and pastors are just like, I have limited time and I want to make a difference in the youth. So if I just turn up to a Vespers program, will that actually help? If I sit in on a Sabbath school class, will that make a difference? Pastors have limited time, they want to make a difference. Parents come to me and they're like, I want to be able to do something with my young people. Well, what do they need? What do I have to do? And they're overwhelmed. There seems to be so much or so little. And it's like, well, hold it, here we go. And so it was kind of like tying together all of the things that I've seen come through over the years and all these conversations, because I'm like, none of these things can be lost, but they go together in a unique way. And so a lot of prayer and a lot of conversations with youth leaders and pastors created this. And so it is online, checking out different places, or email me and I'll send. There's actually a one-page illustrator free. We don't charge for that. And yeah, and it's there, and it just kind of clicks and helps us always to. And a lot of pastors, I even had a pastor this week just say, hey, that's up on my wall, and that really helps me every time that I converse with young people. That helps me know how to make a difference, just there sitting on the wall. So just a reminder, yeah, that's how it works.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to change tack here, Lance, and I'm going to just seek your insights and understanding around an area that I've seen you involved with and leading and using quite effectively, even though, and excuse me when I say this, you're not really a sports person, and yet but yet you really are a proponent of sports ministry. And I've seen you do this so effectively over the years. And now that you're based in the South Island, I've noticed how you've built that up even more, what's taken place there. So just your insights into why, and let me ask the elephant in the room question while I'm at it. So competition, and Christianity, how have you dealt with that? So let's just park that second piece for now, but just sports ministry, and why do you pursue this as an approach to youth ministry?
No, big question. And I am a believer. So when I first when you first invited me into the youth pastor role in the North Island, one of the things I was struck with was there are 4 big sports tournament weekends per year. That was and they were what I called the redwoods of youth ministry in the North Island. Like, redwoods are such big trees, and everything else just seems so small compared to them. And I looked at everything else on the calendar, and those big sports tournament weekends were just huge. And I'm like, so they have to serve a purpose. Otherwise, they are creating a space that doesn't allow anything else to grow up, because that was the reality. They're so big. And so I initially was a sports ministry agnostic, if I was to actually put a phrase to it. I'm like, I don't know. And so many people would come in and ask that question. Adventists in competition, Adventists in sports, can we do that? Should we do that? And so I never was in doubt about us running them, but I'm like, they have to serve a very clear purpose. And one of the things that struck me was what you had done previously a few years earlier with them, which was to revision them. And one of the things that struck me was your desire to see them serve the point of connecting, meaningfully connecting with other young people and with God. So there had to be a strong fellowship event, but also a strong discipling event. Like, young people had to be able to connect with God through sports. And if that couldn't happen, then maybe we should pull the plug. But I noticed that that revisioning had really paid off, and just taking that and even reintroducing it to the young people, they really went for that. And like, they would start talking about, like, they'd come off the courts and just go, we didn't win, but we got to have fun with the other team and actually get to know them better. Like, we're here for fellowship. And then youth leaders kind of going, what do we do with them? And realizing they were a great opportunity for discipling young people to talk, to actually put into action everything we preach about and share and teach about and worship about. There's actually now a safe place to explore that and help young people to see what actually faith in Jesus looks like in the real world. And that's what these sports ministry weekends became about. And young people just so got that. And so it was like, absolutely grow and continue to protect that sacred vision for these big weekends. In terms of a couple of, I guess from a youth pastor perspective, the burger model, like, very few events actually fulfill those components in a burger model, like the sports tournament weekends.
Okay.
Like, there are no other opportunities, particularly in the North Island, where young people get to come together with hundreds
Yeah.
of other young people to make friendships and connections.
Mm.
Sports tournaments, by their very nature, demand caring adults to make it happen, to organize it, to be there, to look out for young people. Like, it's just like the burger buns are, it's an event that forces those, or provides so many opportunities for those burgers to grow, the buns to grow.
Yes.
And then, because they're vision, they're all about acceptance and fellowship and discipleship. So the substance is there. And then you've got young people opportunities to be captains, to lead,
Right.
to be involved in the youth rallies, to actually serve, to show their gifts. And so profound. And then grace, like, stuff happens on the court, stuff happens on the field. And, you know, that learning to actually be forgiving and grace-filled and love-focused, like big ticks, discipleship events, they really happen. Now, I know there are still people who are skeptics, you know, but one of the privileges I had was having conversations with people who would come up to me and they'd say, Lance, we just want you to know that these weekends, what they mean. And they would share with me how they went through a phase where they walked away from God and walked away from church, but their connection to a faith community and their connection to God and their connection to Adventism remained because of these sports tournament weekends. And they shared how that directly was something that God used to bring them back to him and to church. And these were youth leaders and other people who were leading, who said, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had something that kept me connected. And these weekends are directly that thing that God used. You know, and these are the testimonies that I actually heard. It actually made a difference in the lives of our young people. You know, it actually changed lives. It actually was something God was able to use. And that's one of the profound things that I've learned is God will use anything that's actually surrendered and committed to him. And I know that he uses these sports tournament weekends because I've seen the impact on our lives of our young people. But it's always making sure it is something in his hands. It's not actually competition focused. You know, the competition simply serves us learning how to live out our faith in the real world. And young people love that because they always, when you hold up a higher ideal, a higher vision for young people, they're like, I want my life to make a difference. I don't want to just do the same as everyone else. I want it to really be a profound life that I get to live that makes a difference for God and in God. And so whenever we can vision any of this stuff along those lines, God can use it and young people step up to that. They love that. And that's what I've seen. So I am a proponent of sports ministry, but it's with that understanding of what sports ministry should be in Christ and for Christ. And I do absolutely tip my hat. That is something that was completely, I guess, gifted to me by the way that you had set vision around those sports tournaments, and then just seeing the fruit of that and being able to continue to speak into that.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you. I have been very interested and intrigued in the way the tournaments have developed over the last many years, really, because not only the tournaments themselves, but the whole weekend and the different elements that make up the weekend. So there's the youth rally and the way those have been run. There's the tournaments, but then there are the pieces in between that take place in terms of the team dynamics and the connections between the different youth groups that take place. And so I noticed a shift where this may be stretching it a bit, but I did notice this year when you and I went as guests to the basketball tournament in the North Island, it seemed to me that sure, there were those who wanted to play a good game of basketball and to hopefully do well, but the winning wasn't as high an ideal or a priority. That intrigued me. I thought, oh, okay, this is something. This is really, really good. You brought in the term for his glory and really pushed the focus more and more to Jesus at the center, What we're doing is for God, and so let's shift where we are gazing, what we are looking at. And it's now in the hands of William Irua, and we can see that the way the Lord has led him. And I even heard comments on the side where people were saying, well, at the end, people really came in together, they gathered, and this is what you were saying with the burger model. They came together in this sense of family. It's this one big massive family. And so I really do love the way that the tournaments have grown and extended beyond just sport, which it never was ever just about sport, but it has become very much more about ministry. And the other piece, and it came to mind when you were talking about people who've come and shared with you how it's impacted their lives and it's kept them connected to the Lord and to the church. But I love seeing all these young people who we don't usually see there at these events. And you and I have talked about this in the past, how it seems these tournaments are a bridge that provide a real connection for those who are walking in this season very closely with the Lord, but the wider family that includes those whose walk maybe not even with the Lord anymore, but they'll turn up at the tournament, and then those who they just turn up at the tournament, but they come and this is their church, and they belong, they have ownership, they have real belief and support. And I think it ensures that the door is always open to everyone. Yeah, so yeah, thanks for your sharing today about that. I'm going to take us in a little bit deeper here, I think, by trying out something with you, Lance. And I've been part of this, and I've said we've got to find ways to make the church, and saying that sometimes even Jesus and the Bible and the gospel and the doctrines and all, we've got to make these things relevant to the young people. And yeah, I've been thinking about this a bit lately. I've heard some commentary where there's been criticism saying, well, relevancy is the new righteousness. And my question to you, Lance, is should we be making the church relevant to youth, or have we been off track again?
Boy, such a cool question. And yeah, another big one that people are debating about. One of the, I guess, taking a step back, what springs to my mind is, imagine if one Sabbath, there was a kids' church and we went to a kids' church. What would we experience and expect? We would walk into a place that's vibrant, colorful, interactive. Those leading it would be sharing in a way that engages and connects with kids. It's a kids' church. We would expect it to be shorter, sharper, energetic. Just we'd expect a kids' church where we get what that would look like. But as an adult, we would walk away from that going, yeah, the message made sure it applied to kids' lives. It was done in a simple way that talked about school or sports, or but we'd walk away with the understanding that wasn't for us.
Yeah.
Because the way it was done and the way it was applied wasn't actually for us. We would get that.
Yes.
And what we don't realize is that it's actually the flip side for so many of our young people. They go to church, and the way that they see the way we do church and the way we apply a church isn't for them. It's very, very adult focused. And, we often talk about, well, no, church should be for families. It should be for everyone. Everyone should get something out of, when I say church, I mean more the Sabbath worship program. But we send a very strong message that no, this is for adults. And I've sat in a board meeting where adults actually said, no, the main church service has to be for us. Kids are not a priority. They've actually said, look, the elements for kids, they get the kids' story. Nothing else should be for them. Everything else has to serve us. And that's scary because it sends a message to other generations that the main worship is not for them. Now, that's another way of saying, is it relevant? Relevant says, can I engage? Can I connect with the way you're presenting Jesus? Is my walk actually important enough for you to want to speak into it? That's another way of saying, should it be relevant? And I think when we understand that, the answer is yes, and one of the things when I think about this question, have we as a church actually tried to be relevant to young people? And I would suggest we haven't even tried. We've debated and talked about it, but think of a worship service, or in fact, more than one, not just a one-off, but think of a church that does worship in a way that is shorter and sharper. Young people, anybody under the age of 40, always says we want church to be shorter, or particularly the message to be shorter, like in a way where the message is shorter, it's more interactive, it's more engaging for young people. And the message at the end talks about, well, hold it, today we've looked at this subject, or this Bible character. Here's how this applies to us in our life. So for adults, here's what it looks like. For youth, here's what it looks like. For children, here's what it looks like. I've never been to a church service that actually made sure that every age group was challenged or encouraged how to apply the word for where they are at. That's relevancy. And young people simply say, look, when I come to church, whatever that is, I want you to be able to share Jesus in a way that I actually understand, I actually can engage with, and I can actually use. And one of the biggest things that I get from young people is they just go, church will not address the areas of my life. Like, it just won't actually talk about the issues. It won't talk about how to deal with stress, how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with mental health, how to deal with, I'm out there in the real world where they're talking about what to do with LGBTQ, like, in fact, they're not even talking. They're my family and my friends out there. My church won't even talk about how to address that and connect that with faith, I've seen churches just very reactive. They will shut that down and just go, it's wrong. We don't want to talk about it. You shouldn't even be bringing it up. And young people simply go, huh? And even just like technology, like a church to be able to say, hey, let's talk about technology. How do we use technology to be able to grow in Christ and to share Christ? Like, this is all young people want. When they say we want church to be relevant, that's all they're asking for. They're not asking for, we just pull out the trigger points. Oh, they just want drums in church. Oh, they just want raging music. Oh, they just want to be up at front showing off. And young people are like, we don't want that at all. We simply want to be able to know Jesus and grow in him, and to be able to take what we learn back into our everyday lives, the other 6 days of the week that aren't Sabbath. We don't want to be trained to be an Adventist sitting in church. We want to be equipped to be a person of faith out in the real world where God sent us. That's relevancy. And that's actually what they're asking for. And we turn it into these other trigger points of, oh, that's what they want. And, when we look at, it's understanding the nature of what is church. Church is a community of faith, a community of people. So should church be relevant for everyone in that faith community? Yes. Like, it should be. What is the purpose of church? To know Jesus, grow in him, and to be able to serve him. So should what we do be relevant to everyone with that purpose? It's got to be. What is truth? When we actually look at biblical truth, God is a God of love and truth, or a God of mercy and justice. Like, these are the two biggest components of his nature. And this is what he invites us as a church to be: churches of mercy, churches of love, and churches of truth and justice, and to be individuals of love and truth. But one of the things we don't realize is, as a church that prides itself on being a church that has the truth, we don't realize that truth biblically always serves and protects love.
Mm, mm, yeah,
Like that's truth's function.
mm,
Like
mm,
justice is so important because it protects and allows relationship and love to continue. Without truth and without justice, love is vulnerable and actually gets diminished and actually gets
yeah,
snuffed out. Like justice and truth actually protect love. It's like in a marriage. If marriage is just a bunch of rules, true rules, um, you're missing the
no,
love. But a
that's
good
right.
marriage, of course, it has rules around it because they actually protect the most important things: relationship and love and growing together. Like truth does not exist out here by itself.
Yeah,
It always serves and builds up love. And so when we understand what truth is, and we're like, we pit it against love, or we pit it against relevancy, or we pit it against something else, we have lost the true nature and the blessing of what truth is.
yeah,
Like one of the greatest gifts and character aspects of God is his truth, is justice.
yes,
But
yes.
it's something that we don't hold on to. It's something that actually has to be in place to
Mm,
protect relationship and love. And so when we understand that, we yeah, sometimes we ask wrong questions that we need to go back and go, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. Do we
yeah,
know what church is? Do we know what truth is? Do we
yes, yeah,
because sometimes, yeah, um, and I guess that's the example of Jesus.
yeah,
He was always relevant. He was not afraid to use stories that linked profound spiritual truth, profound the love character of God
yeah,
with where people were at, to make sure that they really engaged but understood what he was sharing. Like the parables were typically very, very, here's an aspect of your life and I want to speak into it. I'm interested in it.
mm,
And this is
mm,
how God's truth and his love directly applies to your life. So when you leave the synagogue, when you leave this place of teaching, you actually know how to live out God in the real world. Like that's what Jesus always did. And as a church, I think that's our mandate. And
yes,
so we don't chase relevancy for the sake of, well, let's be modern and hip. We
mm,
chase relevancy to ensure that the word of God and the truth of God and the love of God never gets lost and maintained just in the four walls of a church on a Sabbath morning. Like, we're told to go. New Testament church,
mm,
our aim is we come together to be equipped and then we're sent to go to the world. We need to be able to know how the word of God goes there. And so that's relevancy,
yeah,
being sent, being relevantly equipped. And
mm,
that's what our young
mm,
people ask for. That's what they want. And one of the things that struck me recently was young people were talking about church and kind of around this, like church actually being the church that God's called us to live out as a
mm,
church of love and of justice. And this was when the Dawn Raids apology was coming out. And I'm
mm,
like, I put it to the young people because they were trying to wrestle with what does it look like for church to be a place of truth and love today. And I
mm,
said, imagine if around the time of the Dawn Raids, the Seventh-day Adventist Church had come out and said, hey, look, we actually feel that this is not a great way to honor our communities and our families. Like, this is wrong to actually treat parts of our community this way. There's no dignity, there's no respect, that's not who we are as a nation. And we want to just put up a hand and as a faith community say there is a better way. Like, imagine
mm,
what that would have meant.
yes,
And that's a church of love and of justice, of truth, saying, hey, we exist in the real world, and government, we're not trying to just be a pain, but we have to put up a hand and say, hey, there's a better way.
yeah,
This is not right.
mm,
And imagine that's church. That's a profound church that understands the nature of God, of his love and his truth in the real world. And young people, you can just see the lights going on, going,
oh,
that's the church we want
yeah,
to be.
yeah,
And I'm like, yeah, because that's a church
mm,
that makes a difference.
mm,
That's a church that understands God
yeah.
and all that he's called us to be.
I like the way you've framed this in not even just talking about relevancy, but focusing on connection, the ability for us to connect with each other in a way where there is understanding and appreciation and valuing of people, being they young people or children or adults, But in that connection comes then the meaning that has depth, so that it's not just relevancy that is window dressing and we're just doing this to be hip, but no, we've connected, and through that connection people meet Jesus, they find their purpose, and therefore church is relevant, not by and so I really value that, and I thank you for touching on these areas that there is definitely disconnect, where there are matters and issues that are important to young people because of the world that they are living in today and the interactions that they have with friends at university, at school, at work. And yet it seems like you walk into church on Sabbath and it's like that world doesn't even exist. And so where do we find that, and how do we walk through that together? Well, Lance, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me on Dealing Hope today. I have loved this conversation and been blessed by your insights as always. And so thankful for what God continues to call you to do and the way he shaped you and called you now to serve where you are in the South Island. So blessings to you, and looking forward to, hopefully, I'd love to talk to you again on another conversation about chaplaincy, because I know that's a big part of your calling and your heart as well.
That's good. All right. No, thanks, Eddie.